Welcome to The Way Home with Laura Smith, the show that brings you wonderful guests, helpful advice, and uplifting stories. The Way Home. Be inspired. Here's your host, Laura Smith.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home. I'm Laura Smith. Well, speaking of home, I have someone here that knows all about the real estate business. And my, oh my, has it been an unprecedented. That's the word that has probably been said more than any other word over the last 2 years between COVID and just living life in general. But for the real estate market and for people buying and selling and wondering what the heck is going on, it has been fascinating to watch. I personally have been involved in it. I sold a home at the height of the pandemic in 2020 on the East Coast, moved Midwest, and bought a new home here. And I have to say, it's just been quite a ride and so interesting. Well, I have an expert with us today, Sidney Potter. He's an author and real estate mortgage operations consultant. He has a fabulous book that I think everybody would be interested in reading about, because one way or another, we're all affected by the real estate market. The book is called The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward, and it's available on Amazon. Sidney, thank you for joining us today on The Way Home.
Well, Lori Smith, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, isn't it interesting? I mean, I remember I was going to put my house on the market in May of 2020, and everyone said, "Are you crazy? People aren't even allowed to walk through your home right now."
Yeah.
And I was living right outside of Manhattan at the time. And I just had this really big feeling that people would be leaving the city en masse at that time. And I was right. I had multiple bids on my house from people in New York City wanting to live in beautiful Westchester County. And so that was an easy no-brainer. Then I came to the Midwest, found a house that because of the time in the pandemic that it was, the prices were actually very good. So I got a really beautiful home on a river and for a fantastic price. That was a year ago. Let me tell you, it has changed so much. You cannot list a house where I am right now and it's not sold. Literally, you have sometimes up to 17 bids on a home within 24 hours. It's crazy. Wow. So Sidney, tell us, is this the new normal? What can we look forward to? How is this different from, say, the crash that happened in 2008? And now is this huge spike in home sales and even commercial sales? Is it going to continue to go up like this? What is happening?
I would say Shakespeare said it best when he said the best of times, the worst of times. And that rings too true today. It's funny, you said 17 listings, and one of my, that's just incredible. What you're going to see is that you'll see pockets of appreciation in some markets and in some that you won't. Some markets are simmering down, but in the Midwest, where you are domiciled right now, fortunately, there's still a seller's market out there. I think that ultimately, when you make a comparison between what happened in 2008 versus now, that you'll view it as one was man-made and wasn't, and one wasn't. Of course, the plague is not really, depending upon if you're a serious conspiracist, is not man-made. It's just, I suppose if you're biblical, you would think of it as an act of God, but they're distinctively different, Lori, in that one had to do with malfeasance within the home industry and the mortgage securitization world, and the present idiom that you see it in is a result of a health pandemic, that there's nothing systemically wrong with the market. There are going to be some sectors that lag behind and will take time to get normal to, and there are some sectors such as the residential that you have a first-hand testimonial to that are going to keep simmering down, and it could be really the result of a lot of pent-up demand post-2008 crash, because keep in mind the Great Recession was approximately 6 years, 2008 to 2014, where it almost gave the market an excuse to appreciate, that the floodgates were let out. So it's very clear that we've got some winners and losers here on the residential side. If you're selling, if you're in the residential side but you're not an owner and you're a tenant, have a leasehold interest as opposed to a fee simple interest, which would be the actual ownership of a home, that it may not be so well.
So tell us, Sidney, I mean, for somebody who is considering, I was actually considering maybe buying sort of an investment type of home to maybe rent out or something. But I'm a little unsure right now whether that's a good thing, especially given light of the moratorium on evictions that's taking place in some cities and not all, of course. I'm wondering if that is any longer a viable thing. Real estate used to be pretty much something you could count on being able to invest in, at least for the last several years, as a source of income. How is that now for people?
Yeah, what I do when I talk to, in particular, the Southwest, Arizona, Nevada, California, I'm on the phone with some of the brokers. I say, the first thing I ask about the multi-unit they're selling is, what's the collection rate? Meaning that, are you getting 90 to 95% positive collection on rents, or are the rents in arrears? And you'll find that out when you start to close a property, what they call an estoppel certificate, where someone attests to them. It's essentially an affidavit whether or not they're paying rent. So if you're looking at someone's book, the owner's books, and you're thinking about closing a fourplex, and it says, wow, this is great, everyone's paying on time, and then your lawyer and or your realtor hands out estoppel certificates, which is an affidavit to say whether or not you truly are making those payments, you'll see whether or not there's any light between those two stories. So obviously you want to get a situation where, through your due diligence escrow, that the investment property you're looking at, you're actually making payment on. Anything below 50 units is considered small, where the collections right now, because of the moratorium that you mentioned, Marie, are probably 60 to 80%, which is not great. That's barely going to meet the debt service. About half the expense for a small owner, 50 units or below, goes towards the maintenance of mortgage debt. So that's, and if you get in a situation like that, you can obviously bow out escrow, just make certain that the deposit is refundable. I think you're going to, not that I think, but I can tell you, keep your ears close to the local news, okay, on whether or not there's a high area of real estate moratoriums in effect to the market. I happen to be familiar with Illinois. I lived in Illinois in the Lincolnshire area, not too far from Highland Park. I know that areas are drastically different, such as Waukegan, which is a couple miles south of Wisconsin. Then you go down towards Indiana. So you're going to see a balkanization of collection rates. I think, which means, to answer your question more specifically, really concentrate on areas where there's rent stability that you don't hear a lot of bad stories of. If you've got an area that's blighted, C- area, there's a good likelihood that your collections aren't going to be that high. I would go to a better place where it's probably going to be a B+. The return on your investment may not be as much for an A- B+ area, because everybody wants to buy there because it's a desirable place as an investor. But at least you've got the peace of mind, as you indicated, Lori. If I get an investment, will it be stabilized? And one other element I can ask, just the balkanization, there are some states that will allow a small investor, mom and pop, to ask for up to 6 months, which seems unfathomable. That seems almost egregious, 6 months worth of rental statements as an escrow hold. Some places you can do that. Some places it's actually against the law. So you'd want to know, wherever you're looking at, how much can I have on the first month, last month in deposit, just as a cushion point if things go south in this, this rental moratorium industry that we live in, this world that we live in right now.
Well, my guest is Sidney Potter, and he's an author and a real estate expert. And your book, The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward. Speaking of moving forward, what do you see within the next year or two? Is the market going to remain robust? Is it what do you see as the trend coming out of this year and going into 2022 for real estate?
Right. So you're going to see that multifamily properties are probably going to have a strong demand on those properties that are of a certain size, or you can have a smaller size, fourplexes. But if you're in desirable parts of the city or the region, let's say Soho District or Mid-Manhattan, or if you're in West Hollywood, Brentwood, Santa Monica, places like that. I mean, there are pockets in Dallas, Texas, uptown and downtown area that are very desirable, where collection and appreciation happens to be good. So you'll see a strong demand to park money there. There are 370 MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas, in which markets are judged by real estate markets. and most of them are on the upward bound. Some have stabilized. There are those that are particularly urban that, unless you have the fortitude to weather some strong variability, you probably want to stay away from those areas. And you'll find that the recovery lag on that is going to be a little bit longer than, let's say, I would say B+ area. So it doesn't. This is not rocket science. I'm certainly not suggesting that it is or isn't, Lori, from your question. But it takes a little bit of due diligence to find out where there's less upside but more stability, and there's more upside and substantially more variability. It just depends what you're conditioned for and what you're willing to absorb at this point.
Okay. Sidney Potter, thank you so much. His book, one more time, The Broker, Deals, Steals, and Moving Forward. You can find it on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sidney Potter.
Lori, good day. Thank you.
You're listening to The Way Home. We'll be right back.